Welcome to this week's episode of the People Success Circle podcast. I have a special guest today. Her name is Michele Kreuzer, and Michele is a sleep expert. As you know, this podcast is about the people side of the business. And when I think about that as a leader and as, a professional in the workplace, I think about how the actions we take affect how we show up at work. So this was just a natural topic that fits into what I believe is important for the people side of the business. So Michele, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be a guest.
Yes, I'm very interested in the whole person when it comes to how we show up in our life, whether it's at work or with our families. And so when I started, learning more about what you do, it just seemed like a natural fit. So Michele, I know this story and I think my listeners would be excited to hear it too. Tell us about how your career evolved into being an expert on sleep.
Absolutely. So I was a special education teacher for 20 years. I became a BCBA, which I'll call it behavior specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with children with common but difficult behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with parents, teachers, coaches. And how do we help build these appropriate behaviors and how can we help the child better communicate? And I noticed how sleep impacted that. And so I did work for some private companies when I became a BCBA and I decided to go off on my own. And it was when I went off on my own and I really got to know the families better and all of the other, like I said, the coaches, the teachers in this child's life. And when the child wasn't sleeping, even when everything was going as planned, the behavior strategies were working, the progress was being seen. When there were a few nights without sleep, it just threw everything off. And I felt it was a ripple effect because it wasn't just the child's behavior at home. It bled into school. It bled into academics. The parents then were not sleeping. They were losing patience. And I thought, oh my goodness, I know all of these behavior strategies, but I don't know what to do when the child's not sleeping. And I went back to school. I learned what impacts a child's behavior, how to help the parents teach their child how to fall asleep independently. And the craziest thing happened is my sleep started to improve. I always thought, well, I'm just not a good sleeper. I just don't sleep very long. I thought that was just me. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is okay. I can change my behaviors, my thoughts, my beliefs about my sleep in order to improve. And then even though those parents were saying, okay, I'm glad that you helped my child, but now can you help me? And I love education. I love learning. And I thought, I think I can do that. And I just keep learning because there's so much to learn about sleep.
Yes.
Yes. And so that's the kind of the snapshot of what took me here.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about what your business looks like today with regards to your consulting.
So working with adults, I work with adults with insomnia. And it's called CBTI. How do I say this? It drives me crazy. When I wasn't sleeping in my 40s, I went to the doctor and here's trazodone, here's a sleeping pill, here's something. And it wasn't until I went back to school that I heard of CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it's just about changing like I said, changing our behaviors and our thoughts and beliefs about sleep greatly impact how we sleep. And so that's working with adults. I still work with parents, not as often, but helping them teach their child how to fall asleep independently so they can sleep. And honestly, my favorite thing to do is, I think it's the teacher in me, is workshops, speaking events where I can talk to groups of people, going to conferences and sharing not just the impact of sleep, but then, okay, we understand that it's important. What can we do about it? So kind of the how, the why, and all of that.
All of that. Yeah. It's interesting. I've never heard of CBTI. And so I definitely want to unpack that. But what you already said that got my antennas up was how we talk to ourselves about sleep impacts how we sleep. And like you said, I'm just not a good sleeper, or I have insomnia. It sounds like you did this, and I think a lot of people do, kind of accept I'm just not good at that. And there's nothing I can do to improve it. but what would you say to somebody who says that?
Our minds are a powerful thing. Our thoughts are powerful. So if you catch yourself during the day saying, my goodness, like I didn't sleep well, I feel awful, I never sleep well. And we tell at least I did, I would tell everybody, I would be picking up my Wawa and they'd say, how are you? Well, I'll be better when I get this caffeine in me, because like I shared the fact that I couldn't sleep. And then it was, as it got closer to bedtime, it was, oh my gosh, please let me sleep tonight. I
Yeah.
have to sleep tonight. How am I going to even function tomorrow? And when we start worrying about our sleep, that creates a hyper arousal. And so then we're not sleeping. And that's exactly why too, when we get up in the middle of the night and we do that clock watching where we're like, you feel like you're awake and you like kind of look at the clock and gosh, it's 2:00 in the morning. I knew this was going to happen. I knew I wasn't going to sleep through the night. And what I didn't know then is that's normal. We all wake up in the middle of the night. Even those people who think they don't wake up in the middle of the night, they do. So we all wake up. But the moment we're upset that we are awake, then that starts that hyper arousal and we have to be rested in order to sleep.
In order to sleep.
And so the worst thing you can do is look at that clock, keep clock watching, because you're like, oh my God, hour went by. No, I have this thing to do tomorrow, or, oh, I'm going to be a mess. And those thoughts really wreak havoc on our sleep.
Okay. I am so guilty. I'm listening to you say that. And I think I do that. I mean, even if I get up, or it's not even getting up, it's just looking, knowing consciously that's taking me longer to fall asleep than I want it to, then I start worrying about it. And like, oh my gosh, if I cannot sleep, then tomorrow's going to be really hard. And I know this. And I get like anxious then, instead of really focusing on what I can do to relax. And so I'm imagining everybody does that when they start to clock watch, like you're saying, they start to think, okay, now I'm adding anxiety to the mix or worry.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I tell people that are clock watchers, I tell them, you do not need to know what time it is in the middle of the night. You really don't. Turn your clock around. That one thing can help. That one thing. You don't need to know what time it is in the middle of the night. If you have your alarm set and you're awake, okay, my alarm didn't go off yet. I don't need to be up. And it's changing that. And it's really difficult for people that have been struggling with insomnia for months and even years. It's very hard to change our thought process.
Yeah.
So it's changing little bits at a time. Like my only job right now is to rest. That's my only job right now. So changing those thoughts. And the important thing is to catch those thoughts when we're like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to function. Well, let's look at that. How many times we all have the occasional poor night's sleep and we get by. We really do. I've done it before. And do it again. I'm going to be okay. And, it's how would you talk to a best friend, and really just changing little bits and pieces. And of course, there's different tricks, and how to, distract our mind from those thoughts. But the biggest thing is catching it and realize,
Yeah. It reminds me of that quote that I've seen many times about, you have 100% track record of surviving hard days, and this is not going to be any different. Like, I think about that too, because I do carry oh my gosh, I'm speaking tomorrow on stage or something, and I must get sleep. And I really use that language. Like, I must get good sleep. But then, like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow's going to be a bad day.
Exactly. And the more we try for sleep, the more it eludes us. You can't force yourself to fall asleep. It's just, so the more we're like, I have to, I need this, I'm desperate. It's like, not going to happen.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. So let's talk about the effect of sleep, positive sleep or bad sleep, on our performance as an employee.
It shows up everywhere. I think I heard this once in a podcast I was listening to, and it's so true. It said, if sleep is like a Mad Libs puzzle, you can say sleep impacts blank, because it impacts everything. So if you're thinking about your job, if you're not sleeping, there's more errors, mistakes, missed emails. Stress seems bigger, like all of the things we have on our plate. And stress and sleep are interesting, because when we're stressing, it impacts our sleep. But yet when we're not sleeping, it makes all of that stress seem so much larger. and
Mm.
more difficult to handle. We'll notice that we're not as patient. Sometimes that patience is just like internal, like I'm not
Mhm.
in the mood for this, whatever today. But then sometimes when we're really sleep deprived, it's harder to hide that impatience. And then have you ever responded and you're like, those were big emotions that I had that didn't match what was going on. So,
Yes.
yes.
I have
So,
definitely had that, and in hindsight, even with parenting, right? I will kind of lose my cool or, not say something the way that I would usually say it, as kind as I would usually say it, and oftentimes it comes back to how I'm prepared for the day, not necessarily something the other person's doing.
absolutely. And all of these things I'm saying happen both in home, at work, that professional and personal overlap. And
Mhm.
even have you ever been really, really busy and you're like burning the candle at both ends and then you get sick and you think, I don't have time to be sick right now. Like, I don't need this on top of everything else. And so our immune system takes a hit also when we're not sleeping. So
Mhm.
it really does, as far as like our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health, all of those things are being impacted when we're not sleeping. And the one thing too is sometimes, I hate to say this, but sometimes people, that's their norm. Like getting 5 or 6 hours is the norm. So they don't even know how it's really impacting them because that's their normal. I
Mhm.
spoke with a nurse and she said that when she got off of shift work, it was like she could see color again. I was like, wow. I thought, oh my goodness, that's eye opening.
Yeah. So if someone's listening now and they're thinking, "That's me. I sleep 5 or 6 hours, and actually I think I'm doing pretty good." What would you say to them?
I would probably ask how many hours are they sleeping when they're on vacation?
Mm.
Because when you have no demands, when you don't have to wake up with the alarm clock, when you don't have to be running here, there, and everywhere, how many hours then do you sleep? That would be my first question. If they go, oh, well, on vacation, I'm sleeping like 7 hours. Okay, that's your body telling you that's what it needs. You
Mhm.
know,
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think that's a really good just self-assessment to do. I do think there are people though who my husband's one of them, to be honest, who really truly thinks like 5 hours is good for me, and he does function. He does function. So I think those people who are listening, or maybe even somebody who's listening and who has insomnia, walk us through the like method or the guidance for someone to self-assess to say, is this really enough for me?
okay. So I will say that it's recommended 7 to 9 hours is the
Okay.
recommended. Are there people that can get by on 6 and are truly okay? Yes. It's a
Mhm.
very small percentage of people. 5 hours, I haven't read any research and I haven't met anybody that's truly like, really, truly okay with 5 hours. And
Mhm.
the other thing too, I look at is if a person is sleeping 5 hours per night, is there one night where they're like, "Oh my goodness," like it catches up and then they sleep for like 8 hours?
Mm.
Because that's another indication. If your body is like only getting 5 hours, but then you crash, that's a good indication.
Mhm. Mhm.
And with insomnia, I did not think I had insomnia, even though I did, because I fell asleep just fine. And that's what so many people will tell me. Oh, I don't have insomnia because I fall asleep just fine.
Mm.
Because I said exactly the same thing. So insomnia can show up in different ways.
Mhm.
One, you're exhausted. You're like, I can't wait to go to bed. Your head hits the pillow. And the moment your head hits the pillow, you're like, "Whew," and then you start thinking about all the things
Mm.
you should have done. Why did I say this? All of those. Okay. That's one way it shows up. Another way is was me. I would fall asleep completely fine. And I would wake up around like two something with
Mhm.
magic number, 2:30, 3 o'clock. I would wake up and then I would like look at the clock, I fall asleep, and then wake up again. Or
Mhm.
I think I might have slept. Maybe I didn't. I'd look at the clock. And then I felt like I didn't get back in a sleep, that true sleep and then the alarm was going off. And then the hardest one is the really early morning wakers. These are the people who go to bed okay. They might go to bed at, 10:30 at night, but then they wake up around 4 and they're like, that's it. I'm up. I can't go back to sleep. And so
I know
those
so many people in that club. Yeah. Or, even just I mean, there are books written about being in the 5 a.m. club, right? I think that's even the title of it, right? So if someone is an early riser, what advice do you have for them on, I mean, is it simply go to bed earlier?
Well, sometimes, but not always. What I do is for the people that are, so anytime I work with anybody, and this is one strategy that you could also do, anybody at home, start recording your sleep. Record when you're going, did you take a nap during the day?
Mhm.
What time did you go to sleep? Did you wake up throughout the night? What did that look like? The funny thing is when I start asking people this question, they say, wait a minute, Michelle, let me get this straight. You don't want me to look at a clock, but you're asking me,
To track. Yeah,
to
I can see that's a valid question.
Yes, it's a very valid question. And I get asked all the time. So basically, you're learning your body's like, how does it feel? So, maybe last night I went to bed at 10 o'clock, slept through. I woke up around like once or twice, and you kind of guesstimate. I think I was up for about half hour, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe it was 2 hours. I don't know, but you're kind of guessing, but you're
Mhm.
recording all of this. And then what time did you wake up? What time did you actually get out of bed? You're recording all of these things because sometimes what people are doing are they might be in bed for 7 hours, but they're only sleeping for 5. And
Okay.
so it sounds, I'm trying to make it as simple as I can. But basically we want to not be in our bed when when we're awake.
Mm,
That I
yes.
know, and that sounds really difficult. So if you really truly can't sleep and you're finding yourself awake at, 3 o'clock in the morning and you're unable to fall back to sleep, if it's been about a half an hour, you get up out of bed, try to keep the lights as dim as possible because that light sends a message to your brain. It's time to get up. So that's
Mm,
the other question I would ask the early morning awakener. When you wake up, what are you doing? If they say, well, I gave up. So I go down to the kitchen, I turn the lights on and I get a cup of coffee. Well, you just sent a signal to your brain that it is time to wake up. So I look a
mm,
lot, what does the pattern of sleep actually look like? And then what are you doing when you get out of bed? So that's just, it's so important.
mhm. So I have to ask, what is your take on all the sleep trackers out there?
Okay, so I have mixed feelings depending upon how a person is using it. So
Mhm.
I've had some people that are like, okay, I have the Whoop, I have my Apple, and it says that, I'm not getting deep sleep. And if this information is causing you angst, stress, I would say try to do away with it because
Mhm.
you're furthering that anxiety and that hyper arousal of, I have to get sleep. If a person is using the information and says, when I exercise, I noticed I sleep better and I was able to track that on my Apple Watch, I go, fantastic.
Mhm.
Track those behaviors that are impacting your sleep. Fantastic. And the one thing I will say, your whatever device it is, if it's an Aura, a Whoop, your Apple Watch, they are very, very good at tracking sleep and wake. They are not as good as there's stages, levels of sleep. They're
Yes.
not as good at tracking stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then REM. They are
Okay.
not. So I would not hold a lot of, emphasis on that information
Okay.
because that's not as reliable. Now from person to like if Mindy, if you're using it and you say, "Oh, well my deep sleep improved." Maybe your deep sleep improved, but as far as if it said that you got a half an hour or 2 hours,
It's hard to tell. I
it's
think that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. I wear the Aura Ring, and one thing that, gosh, has been glaring to me is that even if I have one glass of wine, it typically affects my sleep. And then it makes me realize that if I do have a big day the next day, what things could I do to improve my sleep? And for me, it's no alcohol and try to get some exercise, right? Because for me, I can tell the difference. And when I say exercise, I am not like a weightlifter or a boot camp person. For me, exercise is usually either Pilates, yoga, or a good walk.
I love that. And the only thing I would add to that is also the timing of our meals is just as important. The intermittent
Interesting.
fasting, absolutely. Intermittent fasting has gotten a lot of attention lately, but it
Hmm.
really is, it's called restrictive eating. And that not eating 2 to 3 hours before bed is just as important as not drinking right before.
Okay. I don't think I knew that to the extent, right? So tell me about, gosh, I always feel like when I eat the worst is when I'm on a business trip.
Mm-hmm.
What other things can we do as professionals to, even small things to say, what impact can I consciously make on getting a better night to sleep if I need it today?
Absolutely. So I can go through real quickly. The first thing I would do is as soon as you wake up in the morning, get up out of bed. Like
Okay.
I'm talking about as if it's not 3:30 in the morning. But when you wake up and your alarm goes off, get out of bed. Avoid hitting that snooze alarm because you'll feel groggy and you'll feel like a zombie. Just get up. Sunlight, fantastic. Sunlight is the fastest way to send to your brain, it's time to wake up. It's time to, give us that shot of cortisol, and it's time to turn off the melatonin, and it will help later regulate. The more consistent you can be with your sleep, your exercise, and your food, the better, because everything in our body is on a clock. I'm sure circadian rhythm, everybody's heard of that. But what might not be known is every organ, every cell in our body has its own clock. So if we're eating, so say we're winding down for bed, right, Mindy? Say it's like 8 o'clock and we're like, okay, I'm going to start winding down, which is something very important to do. And because it's sending these messages to our brain and, letting melatonin say, okay, it's time for me to kind of let all the other hormones in our body realize it's time for sleep. Anything that you do during the day is going to either help or hurt your sleep. So if you're taking a nap later in the day, that's going to hurt your sleep. If you're exercising, that's going to help your sleep. But all of these, just like our circadian rhythm impacts our sleep, our circadian rhythm impacts all of our organs in our body. So if we're getting ready for bed around 8 o'clock at night, and then we're like, you know what? I really didn't eat much for dinner. I'm starving. I'm going to eat. Well, what's happening is our digestive system now, instead of it slowing down and getting ready to, take a break, is now revving up because we just, at a very late time of night, had a very big meal. And so as everything else in our body is quieting down, digestive system is starting back up, and that impacts other organs as well. So
I have literally never thought about it that way. So, that I think I don't really think of all the parts of the body contributing to sleep. So that was interesting. But also, when we do something like a late night meal, and does a snack included in that?
I would say, obviously, if you had a couple pretzels, that's going to be a big difference from, I had chicken enchilada.
Yes. Yeah.
It's going to be different.
Yeah. But I really didn't think about like you're waking up a part of your body that is usually winding down at this point. And then it makes sense how it would affect my sleep for sure.
Absolutely.
So when you talk in workshops at organizations, walk me through the lessons that you share with people.
So I've spoken to different groups of people. So it really depends because sleep impacts everything we do. So I always like to ask whoever is bringing me in as a speaker, who's the audience? What is the message you're conveying? What's the highlighted topic you want me to speak about? So with coaches, I spoke about sustainability, like sustaining presence during exhaustion. I speak to a lot of groups, college students, parents, different teachers about stress and sleep. How do we sleep when stress is, happening, but then it's changing? And I love that question you asked me, Mindy, about what do we do during the day in order to impact our sleep? And everything we do during the day is going to impact our sleep. And most recently, I spoke with snow and ice removal companies about
That's so interesting.
I did. I loved that talk. I always love talking to groups of people, but drowsy driving is something, it's so scary. Our brains can shut down and we can appear that we are awake. We may appear alert. I shared this one story. I thought this was fascinating. In the Guinness Book of World Records, and this was back in 1964, there was a high school student, I believe his name was Randy, and he wanted to stay awake for as long as he could. He wanted to beat the record. And about 5 days.
That sounds miserable.
Doesn't it sound awful? Oh my goodness.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah. So after 5 days of apparently being awake, one of Stanford's sleep specialists thought this doctor said, I need to go measure what's going on in his brain and his body. And he hooked him up to all of these things. And what was fascinating is through all of these things that were hooked up to his brain, they could see that there was no brain activity. The brain shut down to protect himself, even when he was walking and talking.
My goodness.
Isn't that scary? And
So
now it's wild. And now the Guinness Book of World Records will not allow anything that is harmful to oneself. So they did take that out of there. But basically, a person who is sleep deprived, they don't know how sleep deprived they are. They become unpredictable. And you just can't trust them. And it's not about they're lying and saying, oh, I'm fine, I can do this. It's they truly don't know, how
Yeah.
they're feeling. They really don't. They don't
Yeah.
realize that their brain is shutting down. And it's kind of
Okay.
scary. A person who's sleep deprived doesn't know how sleep deprived they are, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. And gosh, with any emergency worker, right? Just that ability to stay alert is so critical. And so you speaking to that group makes a lot of sense to me, right? So as we were talking before, you mentioned CBTI. Is that right? Tell me a little bit more about that because it sounds like education, and coaching to help us sleep better. But I've heard of CBT, but I've never heard of CBTI. So what does it stand for? And how could someone use that to improve their sleep?
Okay. So CBTI stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia. It's very specific. Typically, it's only 6 to 8 sessions. So somebody
Okay.
might go to a therapist and go for years. But this is 6 to 8 sessions because the person is learning exactly what impacts sleep. So really, there's your sleep drive, everything we're doing from, the exercise, socializing, getting out there, working, learning new things. That's your sleep drive. The second thing is your circadian rhythm. And that is, we briefly talked about that, largely influenced by light, but it's also influenced by food. And then finally, we also mentioned briefly is your thoughts and your beliefs about your sleep have a huge impact. And that is really the hardest things for people to change are their thoughts because behaviors are a little bit easier to change. So what needs to happen is in order for us to believe our thoughts, like, okay, it's all right that I'm awake. I will tomorrow. My sleep is improving. It's almost like you need to start seeing these improvements in your sleep before you're believing what you're telling yourself. It's an overlap of those things. It's much more of a behavioral skills training because there's so much learning that's happening. And the thing that I love about CBTI is once you see a CBTI specialist and you're learning about what's impacting your sleep, you should never need that person again. You should never need CBTI therapy ever because you've learned. And the last strategy or the last session you have with me or someone else is, okay, what did I learn? What helps me fall asleep when I wake up in the middle of the night? What do I need to remember about my behaviors during the day and leading up to bed? So that way, when insomnia strikes its ugly head again, I know what to do about it.
Gosh, I love this so much. I think that there are a couple things that came to mind when you were answering that is that it is fixable. I think a lot of people think I'm just someone who has insomnia. That's just who I am. My dad had insomnia. My mom had it. That's just who I am. And I think that's part of it. But I also think that there are people who don't know exactly that it is called whatever their sleep issue is part of insomnia. So when you think of the definition of insomnia, you even said earlier, it's oftentimes people just think insomnia means that I'm having trouble falling asleep. And so tell me about what the definition would be and then who might be the ideal candidate to come talk to a sleep specialist about CBTI.
So the first thing I would say is if you're going to your doctor and you're talking about your inability to sleep, doctors, just like they only get a small, percentage of their education is nutrition, it's the same thing. There's a small percentage of their education that's for sleep, even though it's so impactful. So asking a doctor, can you recommend a CBTI specialist? Now, the interesting thing with insomnia is you don't go to your doctors and it's not like something where you're diagnosed. It's really something that there's acute insomnia, something happens, and this is going to happen to everybody. Maybe a pet passed away or somebody's going through a divorce. There's something that's stressful and for a short period of time, you're unable to sleep because of that stress. But what happens is if you notice now, instead of being stressed out about whatever that stressor is in your life, and now you're thinking about, am I going to be able to sleep tonight? Am I going to sleep through the night? Am I going to be able to function tomorrow? When that stress changes from, I can't believe this is going on in my life to, am I going to be able to sleep? That's an indication that you should do something about it. You should seek some help.
Yeah, that's a good litmus test. Michele, if you were talking to someone who leads a team about the example they're setting, what are some strategies that you would give them to make sure that they're contributing to good sleep practices for their team? Or what things could they not do that could be hurting the sleep of their team?
I love this question. Okay. So there's a few things. The first thing I would tell a leader is sometimes we're hiding this sleep deprivation. We don't always talk about it. So the first thing I would like to tell the leader is 1 in 3 people are struggling with sleep deprivation, whether they're pushing through, whether it's insomnia, whether it's sleep apnea. Sometimes it may even be undiagnosed sleep apnea. So there are things. So I think first the realization is that 1/3 at any given time of our workforce is sleep deprived. The second thing I would talk about is being a role model. Yes, is like not saying things such as, oh, I had 4 hours of sleep, but that's okay. I got to get this done. Like that leadership role and what that person says conveys a message, maybe even if they don't realize it. And I had one business owner I talked to, and he told me, I'm really concerned because I noticed one of my employees hands things in the middle of the night. Well, that's a conversation. Like, let that person know, I appreciate that you're working at 3:00 in the morning, but I'd really like for you to be sleeping at that time. Sometimes we can take notice to things that are happening and just sharing. Like, there's so many strategies out there. Sharing this information as far as like, there's a very simple acronym. It's called STOP, where people can test themselves and assess themselves if they have sleep apnea, if they should go to the doctors. Some information as far as like what do we do if we're struggling in the, early in the morning to get out of bed? There's so many strategies that we can put in and just sharing those in a newsletter or in a break room. And I think talking about like, we're going to struggle sometimes with sleep and normalizing it, because when you about 1/3 of the population, we're hiding it. We're not, like, I was joking that women are talking about it, but once you get into the workforce, it's different. Like I was sharing it with the Wawa cashier. You don't necessarily want to share it with the people that I'm working with. It's like, drink caffeine and I'm going to try to, wear those little under eye mask things and things that we're doing. But I think normalizing it also is so important.
I love that. And I would also think making sure as a leader that we're not sending messages at odd hours, because I know I used to be guilty of that. And I've definitely had supervisors who would send messages at 9:00 at night or 10:00 at night. And then it always makes me feel like I need to answer them. Right. And so I think modeling good boundaries as a leader will help other people see that they're not required to work after hours, depending on the kind of business. I mean, I've worked for businesses that are open 24/7. And so, you see some of that happen, or that are open on the weekends. I mean, I've worked for McDonald's and Gap and, really, and Disney and places that are really, really on all hours. So I think it's so important for that leader to model to the best of their ability strong boundaries when it comes to reaching out to teams.
Absolutely. I love that. I love too if there was a leader who sent something out at 8:00 at night and say, Mindy, as part of the team if you didn't get to it. I think even following that up with, hey, Mindy, I noticed you didn't get back to me until this morning. Thank you. Like,
Yes.
thank you for waiting because
Mhm.
I sent that because I was worried I would forget the next day. So like, even if you do follow through with, shouldn't have sent it to you so late. And I'm so glad that you didn't respond. I think
Mhm.
that's important too.
Yeah, I love that. I actually had a boss once who would have in her email signature that she works non-traditional hours and she does not expect a reply. I thought that was really good. And then just using that function in, Gmail or whatever platform you use that says you can delay a send, schedule it later. I think those kind of things help people too to know that even if you're getting this message at an odd time, I'm just not I don't expect you to reply, and just having those good boundaries. Even on like Slack and things, I think you can put on like, I'm asleep now, or, I'm not active, and just really respecting those boundaries. And then as a leader, using them too, so that others know it's completely acceptable to not respond.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for your time and your expertise. You really got me thinking personally about some things, and I know that the listeners are going to benefit from it too. Just so many important tactics that we can all use to improve our sleep. And, one of the things it was an aha to me. I did not know that in 6 and 7 sessions, you could improve your sleep if you're doing CBTI. That was totally new to me. And so I will definitely put your information in the show notes and make sure that people can reach out to you, because such a critical part of well-being in the workplace is that quality sleep that we get.
It really is. It impacts everything.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.